Callum Smith versus Eric Skoglund actually turned into be a fairly decent fight, and a fight where both guys put in a performance that was worthy of credit for certain facets of their game, if you like. Let me start by saying Callum Smith, I put this on my Twitter, but genuinely probably the biggest super middleweight I've ever seen. Absolute monster at 168 pounds. Know how tall he is, you know, he's 6'3", 6'4", something like that. He's also very broad. You look at his shoulders, you know, he's a powerful guy, not just his height, you know. And that was really a fixture in this fight. The opponent, Skoglund, was coming down from light heavyweight. You know, he'd campaigned at cruiserweight for a few fights in the past, and here he was at super middleweight, being massively outsized by Callum Smith. Anyway, for me, this was a fight that you could almost break down into a few chapters. If you look at the first 4 rounds, quite tentative. Two guys standing off each other, trying to box, using a fair bit of range, if you like. I actually thought Callum Smith got the better of the first third of the fight. I thought his timing was on point. I thought he was landing good punches, and I thought Callum Smith was actually looking relatively lighter on his feet compared to some performances I've seen from him. Potentially a little bit less robotic than I've seen of him in the past. And I thought after 4, it was looking like Callum Smith, you know, may make a good job of this fight. Moving into round 5, things started to change a bit. Eric Skoglund really established a jab, and he got to the point where in rounds 5, 6, 7, 8, every time Skoglund was throwing that jab, it was landing, and it was landing with a concerning regularity on Callum Smith. Callum Smith was bust up, I think it was in the 5th round, badly bleeding nose. I don't know if it's a broken nose. Later on in the fight, we saw a swelling under Callum Smith's eye. You know, he was eating a lot of the jab from Eric Skoglund, and you know, Skoglund was looking to push the pace forward. He was looking to bring the pressure, and Callum Smith didn't look comfortable at all. I had a small value bet on Skoglund to win by knockout. And, you know, rounds 5, 6, 7, I was actually thinking that I may be in with a chance of collecting there, even though I picked Callum Smith to win the fight. But, you know, Smith was just looking very uncomfortable. He was being out-jabbed by the smaller guy. And defensively, it was a bit of a mess. You know, very much moving backwards in straight lines, chin up in the air, very no head move, you know, little or no head movement, quite stiff, quite upright, quite robotic, the sort of typical Joe Gallagher fighter defensive structure that he's kind of become synonymous with as a trainer, unfortunately. And I thought after about 8 rounds, I thought Skoglund was probably going to win the fight. I thought he was coming on the stronger of the two. I thought he had the momentum. I thought he'd worked Smith out. You know, I thought it was the writing was on the wall for Callum Smith. But Callum Smith found a second wind, and I've got to give him tremendous credit for that. He's a big guy at the weight. He's probably tight at the weight. I don't believe he'd gone to championship distance before. So for him to find that second gear going into rounds 9 to 10, 11 and 12, I thought was impressive. He dropped Skoglund in the 11th, had Skoglund hurt, and maybe Skoglund won the 12th through activity, but really Smith won the 9th, 10th and 11th for my money. You know, he started the better of the two in the first third of the fight, and he finished the better of the two. And even though he looked very beatable in the middle of the fight, to be fair to Callum Smith, he took his licks, he found his second wind, and he weathered the storm and found a way to win. So you've got to give him a level of credit for that. Skoglund emerges with credit. He showed a lot of heart to make the 12 rounds, and he showed some decent skills as well, particularly with the jab. You know, he's a guy who can fight at a decent level. He's probably not got the smoothness and slickness and the technique of his game to be a world champion, but certainly he can be an upper European level champion, and he can be involved in noteworthy fights in his career if he wants to continue. I'm sure he's got a decent payday here, but there's probably some big fights that remain out there for him. As for Callum Smith, you know, he's got some weapons in there. He's a very big guy. He's clearly heavy-handed. I'd like to see him go to the body a bit more. When he went to the body against Skoglund, it was quite eye-catching. You know, we know Smith's a good body puncher, and he was clearly hitting hard to the body, but he didn't use it. You know, Smith's game was very much fighting behind the 1-2, the jab cross combination, which is all well and good, but I would have liked to have seen him try and land a bit more body work, if anything, just to be a bit more, cause a bit more variety, and to try and get Skoglund's hands to drop down to his body with more regularity. Defensively, Smith needs a lot of work. You know, you look at the success Skoglund had with his jab. Imagine if that was George Groves. You know, George Groves, for me, a bigger puncher than Skoglund, a better technician than Skoglund, and George Groves definitely the best jab in the super middleweight division for my money. If that was George Groves, which is a realistic future opponent in this tournament for Callum Smith, he'd have been in very, very big problems there. I also thought the way Callum Smith looked uncomfortable and under pressure when Skoglund tried to take the fight to the inside, you know, I didn't think that looked overly promising for Callum Smith's future in this tournament, I've got to say. Skoglund lacked the technique to get his range right on the inside and to get clean work off on the inside. But if that was a guy like Eubank Jr., you just wonder if he could grind Smith down and put punches in bunches together on him. Smith is not a guy who, for me, is as comfortable at short range as he is long. So I think Smith has difficult times ahead in this tournament. You know, I think that he will certainly struggle against a Eubank and a Groves. I'd pick both of those guys to beat him. But I'd have to say that, to be fair to Callum Smith, I've been someone who's been a sceptic of his for some time, and he did answer some questions today. He went to 12 rounds. He once again proved he was heavy-handed, you know, at a level that probably represented the toughest test of his career to date. And there are some improvements to his game. You know, I felt he was a little bit lighter on his feet than I saw in early fights. Yeah, I thought his timing was okay, and I thought the way he got his second win was fairly impressive. As for Joe Gallagher, you know, I noticed, I'm recording this immediately after the fight, I noticed Smith and Gallagher appearing to have, you know, some sort of debate after the fight. I don't know, I didn't hear what they were saying, whether it was a heated discussion or whether they were just talking through the fight, but, you know, you wonder what Joe Gallagher's doing with these guys, because looking at Callum Smith, it's kind of what you'd want to train him on and what you'd want him to improve on seem to be relatively obvious, but those adaptations don't seem to be happening. You know, Gallagher was giving him advice in the 10th, and at the end of the 10th, it was still a swing fight. You know, this could have gone either way. It was really only into the 11th when Callum Smith got the knockdown that the fight became a certainty in Smith's favour. And, you know, Joe Gallagher was talking to Smith like the fight was over. You know, he said he's getting a bollocking, he's getting desperate, he's having to gamble. You know, he was giving his fighter the impression that it was Smith's fight to lose, and I really thought it was still up in the air there. So, you know, Joe Gallagher takes a lot of stick, but, you know, it's another strange training performance for me from Joe Gallagher. And I think in many ways the pair of them are actually quite lucky that Smith's power scored that knockdown in the 11th, because that kind of put the fight beyond doubt in a way that, you know, it was otherwise still a swing fight. So yeah, credit goes to Callum Smith. He did very well. Skoglund was a good opponent, better than anticipated, and he did very well. He started well, his timing was on point, and he finished strongly. He proved he could do the 12. He showed a lot of heart and he showed some durability to get through tough rounds. He adapted and he came again. A lot of credit goes to Callum Smith. He is a fighter who is clearly not a million miles off world title level. Can he win this tournament? I suspect not. Defensively, open, being out-jabbed by the smaller man, no head movement, very upright, very stiff, you know, chin just waiting to be caught. A guy like George Groves, he's going to have all the success Skoglund had behind that jab and a lot more. A guy like Chris Eubank Jr., he's going to be putting the pressure on him from round one. He's going to be taking the range away from him. He's going to make it very uncomfortable for Callum Smith on the inside. So, yeah, an interesting fight, an enjoyable fight. And this World Boxing Super Series may well create these good fights, because the guys are clearly putting it on the line for paydays that represent their highest earning opportunities in their career, the framework that this tournament provides. In the next round, I understand that he's going to face the winner of Rob Brandt versus Jürgen Bremer. That's potentially a very winnable fight for Callum Smith, so we could easily see him make his way to the finals. But if he's going to have to fight the likes of a Eubank or a Groves in the final, I suspect he could be in for a world of bother. Let me know your thoughts, people. Leave your comments in the section below. What did you think of this fight? What do you make of the future matchups for Callum Smith in this tournament? If you enjoyed this video, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. Do also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so before, and follow me on Twitter at Boxing Gossip. Many thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys taking the time to check out my channel.